Interrupt your lunch. I've asked my good friend and colleague, Hannah Hartman, to introduce Sister Thomas Welder to us.
Thank you for joining us here today. A love of learning and a commitment to God have been central to Sister Thomas Welder throughout her life. Along with her genuine interest in people and appreciation of community, they have provided the foundation for a remarkable life of service and leadership that has touched and inspired many. As president of the University of Mary from 1978 through 2009, Sister Thomas guided the school to phenomenal growth. Ever mindful of the founding Benedictine sisters' mission to serve the needs of the people of the region, she worked tirelessly for the future of the university and that of North Dakota. Born Diane Welder, April 27, 1940, to Sebastian and Mary Ann Welder in Linton, North Dakota, Sister Thomas moved to Bismarck when she was 2. A graduate of College of St. Benedict in St. Joseph, Minnesota, it was while at St. Benedict that Sister Thomas discovered her vocation. Returning home in 1959, she entered the Benedictine community of the Sisters of Annunciation. There we go. I wanted to make sure I didn't say that wrong. Of Annunciation Monastery. After completing her bachelor's degree in music at the College of St. Scholastica in 1963, she became Mary College's choir director. In 1968, she was awarded the Master of Music degree from Northwestern University. She went on to chair Mary College's Humanities Division and served as director of Deferred Giving. 10 years later, she was appointed Mary's 5th president. Under her leadership, the school achieved phenomenal growth and attained university status. A self-described practical woman, she is known for living, learning, and leading by example. Serving on numerous boards and active in community, state, and national professional, civic, and religious organizations, she has promoted and modeled the Benedictine values of service, community, hospitality, moderation, prayer, and respect for persons. She has drawn strength and understanding from her Benedictine community, carrying forth her joy in service. Sister Thomas's many honors include the 1998 GNDA Educator Award, the 2002 Greater North Dakotan Award, and the 2007 Missouri Slope Area-Wide United Way Lifetime of Caring Award. In May 2004, she was presented with North Dakota's highest honor, the Theodore Roosevelt Rough Rider Award. Following her retirement in June 2009, she was made an honorary alumni of the University of Mary and named President Emerita. In 2010, UMary awarded Sister Thomas was honored with the Doctor of University honoris causa. Sister Thomas describes herself as a practical woman. I'd have to add humble, accessible, and caring leader who understands well what it means to live faithfully to the calling you have received. She understands and believes in the ability of individuals to grow into leadership through service. So join me today as we welcome Sister Thomas Welder to speak with us about being called into leadership and service.
Thank you. That introduction was far too kind. And if my mom were here, she would say, sure, but she can't cook and she doesn't play bridge. In his book, Angels Can Fly Because They Take Things Lightly, the author, Dr. Richard Bimler, recalls a time much like this when he was the luncheon speaker. And as the guests were eating, the coordinator came up to him and said, would you be ready to speak now, or should we let them enjoy themselves for a while? It is a great joy to be with you today. And I must tell you, one of the real joys of being part of this luncheon series of the Lorenzen Center for Faith and Work was to meet Dr. Ganjuri. Sister Mariah and I had a chance to stop into her office, and she's quite persuasive. I hadn't heard about this luncheon series, and suddenly I was signed up. But it is truly a joy and an honor to be here, and I want to pay special tribute to you, Dr. Kraft, and say I bring greetings from the University of Mary. And I must say, to this day, we at Mary look at Concordia College as setting the benchmark for quality in leadership, certainly in faculty, staff, students, and I must mention the alum of Concordia. They are the proudest cobbers, you know? And I'm thinking, what is a cobber? And so in preparation for today, I did do a little bit of research. Yes, so it's actually what cob and so on. So I put that next to Mary Marauders, and maybe it's the black patch in the eye, but I think I would go on the side of the cobbers. But it is absolutely an honor to be with you today. The former president of Princeton, William Bowen, in his book on the digital age, tells a story about Jeff Bezos, the founder and the CEO of Amazon. It seems that when Jeff was a child, he once calculated how much time, with 2 puffs per minute, his grandmother was shortening her life by smoking. And then he promptly went to tell her. Well, as you can imagine, his grandmother burst into tears, but it was the grandfather who saw it as a teachable moment. And he said to his little grandson, "Someday you'll learn that it's harder to be kind than it is to be clever." There is something about that message from the grandfather to his little preschool grandson, saying to him that as you grow, you'll learn that you do have gifts. You are smart and you're clever, but natural gifts are overrated. What matters are what it is that you value. What choices do you make? The Harvard Business Review has just ranked Bezos #1, again, on their list of the 100 best CEOs in America based on financial returns. So they have happy stockholders. But I think with all the disruptions in business today, Bezos may not be able to tell you what's next for Amazon, but he will tell you that the lesson from his grandfather shaped his view of the world. It shaped his life. And here I quote Bezos. He says, "Cleverness is a gift. Kindness is a choice. Gifts are easy. Choices can be hard." Bezos learning, I think, has some application to our topic for today, called to leadership and service. Everyone in this room has remarkable natural gifts. And one of those natural gifts is a willingness to be of service in behalf of others. The challenge comes when we're faced with the call to leadership. That choice can be hard. The strengths and the talents that we have are God's gifts to us. We haven't earned them. And unless we're in the self-centered place of an adolescent, and let me openly confess, I can easily slip right back there any moment, but we do know that God has given us these gifts for a reason, to share, to develop, and to serve the world, the needs of a world much larger than ourselves. How do we see the world? We can have that standoff of ultimate values, trust in God, trust in money, the other-centered view of the world, the self-centered view of the world. The French-American author Anais Nin says, "We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are." God calls us to become servant leaders, and that call can be different at different times for any one of us. It can be the encouragement of a friend to look at something new, an unexpected event in our lives, or a magnetic pull to pause and to listen to the quiet in our hearts. If we develop a greater consciousness and a greater awareness of this idea of vocation, to be called to leadership and service, our work becomes more than just a job. It becomes a life purpose. When we can say, I am called to this, we become more engaged, more motivated by mission, vision, and what it is that we value. And I think we become more collaborative, more willing to relate with those we serve, our colleagues, our customers, our vendors, our clients. And we may even bring back the stories. How did it all begin? Who are the founders? And what is the heritage that continues to give us this will to move forward? Listening and responding to God's call brings us to choose. Not what's easy, but often what's hard. What matters most for the well-being of others and ultimately for our own well-being. I like a lot what Frederick Buechner says. He's Presbyterian minister, author, speaker, and so on. And here's how he talks about vocation. He talks about it as the place that God calls you to is a place where your deep gladness and the deep hungers of the world meet. And I think that's a place for us to talk about servant leadership. It was a phrase that was coined by Robert Greenleaf in the 70s, and I should mention Greenleaf lived from 1904 to 1990, and I actually only heard him on one occasion at a higher ed meeting, but he had a very interesting background. He was in business his whole life, served in management training positions for AT&T. And he was with him for about 40 years. But it was upon retirement that he began thinking about this, looking back at the model of leadership that he had experienced with AT&T. And it was that industrial concept of leadership that we all know so well. The top down, we think of the pyramid with the CEO on the top, layered hierarchy with the customer at the bottom of that pyramid. It's the kind of model where it's so easy to treat people as things because communication is one way. It's a closed structure where information is reserved for the people on the top. Clearly, this model, according to Greenleaf, would no longer meet the complex human needs of our society. Yet that model persists today, as do the protests and the challenges. And let me give you just one example. A couple of classmates, and they were led by Casey Gerald, who I understand has been in Fargo and may be coming back in July, but he was in last year's graduating class from a Harvard School of Business. They have started a not-for-profit called MBAs Across America. Here's their vision, and I quote, "We are trying to write a new field manual for business across America. It can't be about hierarchy, leaders sitting in the corner office and going to the Hamptons while everyone else is pressing sheet metal. It can't be just pursuing quarterly earnings. Leaders can't just say, let's do this because it optimizes efficiency. There's got to be a larger vision of the future and for ourselves." Now, Greenleaf, as I say, coined that little phrase of the servant leader. Certainly, we've had servant leaders throughout human history. But it was in the 70s that he came to this conclusion, and here I quote him, "The great leader is seen as servant first. And that simple fact is the key to the leader's greatness. The great leader is seen as servant first. And for Christians, we can hear Jesus in the gospel saying, whoever wishes to be great among you must be your servant." Here's how Greenleaf talks about the servant leader. Servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. Then the conscious choice brings one to aspire to lead. And the difference, the servant leader, is the great care that's taken to make sure that other people's highest priority needs are being served. Service is not the default mode of a leadership. At Concordia at the University of Mary, we absolutely believe that every student has the capacity to become a leader. And that student grows into leadership through service. So we're saying you don't have to be born a leader. It doesn't depend on your gene pool. Although I will mention that Kouzes and Posner have done lots of research on leadership. They say we've never met a leader yet who wasn't born. You grow into leadership through service. One of our students, Rachel, when she was writing for the school paper, first came to marrying this concept of servant leadership, she said it has to be an oxymoron because a servant goes unnoticed and the leader is always in the spotlight. The skills of a servant leader are definable, they're teachable. There are observable practices modeled by countless servant leaders. The truth is that the best leaders are the best learners. And there I'm quoting Kouzes and Posner again. I can tell you that Rachel, over time, as modest as she was, but she became a servant leader. And as she reported, it wasn't because of classes or speakers or convos, but because of the servant leaders she saw in action in her residence hall, in the classroom, wherever she looked. Greenleaf's biggest worry was not evil people, not apathetic people, not people caught up in the system, but people who couldn't or wouldn't make the hard choice. And here I quote him. He said, "The enemy is strong, natural servants who have the potential to lead, but they do not lead, or they choose to follow a non-servant." There are observable skills of a servant leader, and there are many. For those of you who are students, and I'm guessing most of you are servant leaders, you're students of leadership, we all have lists of the characteristics of the servant leader. But I'm going to just take 3 to talk about a little bit today: to listen, to influence, and to build community. And to do that, I'm going to put it in the context of a story that I found in all things in a little Hallmark book. I received this gift from one of our staff members, and I took one look at it, and I thought, oh, this would be a great gift for my niece. And then I made the mistake of opening up, and so my niece hasn't got the book. But here's the story. American missionaries, they'd hired a number of native workers to carry their supplies from one village to another. And the missionaries had that same kind of attitude we all do, kind of the push, rush, hurry. We've got a great message. Let's move right along from village to village. So every day they're prodding their colleagues to move a little faster, to go a little farther than the day before. Finally, after 3 days of being pushed and hurried, the native workers sat down and refused to move. The sad thing is that the missionaries were shocked. They had no clue. So, what in the world is the problem? We've been making excellent time, and there's no need to stop here. So the spokesperson for the missionaries stood up, and he said, "It is not wise to go so rapidly. We have moved too fast yesterday, and now today we must stop and wait here for our souls to catch up with our bodies." With all the good intentions in the world, the missionaries were obsessed with preaching the gospel, and they were entrapped in the idea that it all depended on them. As servant leaders, which they truly were, they forgot that their mission was not about stroking their own egos, but that they were to take care to make sure that other people's needs, that their colleagues' needs, were met first. They were too busy to listen to the needs of the workers, too distracted to influence or inspire them, and too stressed to be concerned about collaborating or even the thought of building a community with the people they really needed. Nearly every world religion insists on the wisdom of finding regular intervals to hit the pause, to block out noise, and to tune into that small, quiet voice within, to hear God's call. We as servant leaders are always striving toward wholeness. I mean, it's called maturing into the adult years, into the years of wisdom, of become sages, toward integrating heart, mind, body, spirit. We know that faith and business can't be separated. Who wants to live the divided life where we're one person at home and we have to be another person in our professional practice? Think again of those missed opportunities of the American missionaries. Carving out time, as Faith was doing for us at the beginning of our prayer today, carving out time in our busy lives to reflect, to pray, to read, helps us become more mindful. It wakes us up. It wakes us up to what really matters, and it expands our capacity to listen in a way that helps others find their wholeness, their healthiness. The current CEO of PepsiCo, Indra Nooyi, says, first of all, I should mention that her overall mission she refers to as performance with purpose. And one of her pillars has to do with people. Now, we're thinking of 270,000 employees, but she asks, I think, a very good and a practical question. She asks, how do we create an environment where everybody can bring their whole self to work? How do we create an environment where everybody can bring their whole self to work? And then she says it helps recruitment, it helps retention. And the famous Trappist monk, Thomas Merton, once wrote, "Learn to live as a unified person. This means that you have to bring back together the fragments of your distracted existence, so that when you say I, there is really someone present to support the pronoun you've uttered." To give just a little focus to our understanding of servant leadership, I'll give this triangle. At the base of the triangle, you see the word credibility, which is the very foundation of leadership. And then the two roles of the leader. On one side, the role is visionary, and the other side, a service or implementing that vision. So those three words, I think, give us, as I say, just a framework as we consider the three skills: listening, influencing, and building community. I mentioned Kouzes and Posner earlier. They've come out now with their 5th edition of their book, The Leadership Challenge. They've been engaged in leadership research for more than 30 years. And they report, and I quote them here, "We keep rediscovering that credibility is the foundation of leadership. It's been reinforced so often that we've come to refer to it as the first law of leadership. People won't believe the message if they don't believe in the messenger. People don't follow your technique or your style. They're not impressed with title or position. They follow you. They follow you, your message and your embodiment of that message. In short, people do what people see. If they hear us say one thing, we do another, we lose our credibility in their eyes." The new generation, the millennials, our next generation of leaders, and here I quote one of them. He says, "For investors and employees, it comes down to a question of trust. It's the connection. What kind of connection," he has, "can be made between great business and a compelling mission? Can we bring together business and mission?" So what makes a leader credible? Kouzes and Posner have done, again, over 30 years of research. They have a simple survey. They've been to Bismarck a number of times. I remember taking that survey. They give 20 characteristics of a leader, from a leader that people are willing to follow. What kind of CEO are people looking for? Over 30 years, they've discovered this, that only four characteristics have always received at least 60% of the votes. And here are the 4 characteristics people hope for in a leader, in this order. Expect a leader to be honest, forward-looking, competent in their area, and inspiring. There's a wonderful little anecdote I remember reading in our local paper. A new CEO had just been named by a board of directors. And the chair of the board of directors said to the new CEO, "We can give you the crown, but we can't make you king. We can give you the crown, but we can't make you king. To become the leader, you must earn the trust of those you serve. They make you leader. They give you the authority." Leadership is a process, a learning experience, and any one of us will gain credibility, not through our position or title, but through service and sacrifice. Through service and sacrifice. The premier skill of the true natural servant leader is to listen first. And the rule that we follow as monastics, the rule of Benedict, which dates way back to the 6th century, the first word that St. Benedict uses is listen. There's a prologue. He says, "Listen to the master with the ear of your heart." With the ear of your heart, which is to say, be fully present. Be fully present. Be humble enough so that you can hear what is God calling you to be fully present. Greenleaf says no matter what the issue, where the place, the automatic response, the habit, the virtue of the leader is to listen, which causes the leader to be seen as servant first, to be seen as someone you can trust, as someone who is credible. So this idea of active listening, I have to work at this all the time. You're in conversation with someone, and then suddenly I'm thinking, oh, now what commitment did I make at 3? Because this is like 2:30, and I think, oh no, fully present. Okay, so it's a sacrifice, because in a sense you're extending yourself to be the most irrevocable gift we can give anybody is our time. It'll never come back. It's the most beautiful gift we can give anybody, our time and our presence. The Buddhist teacher says the quality of presence determines the quality of life. And I think that's so important in this digital age where the new icon is a screen, no matter what size the screen is. And the average attention span at this point has dropped from 12 minutes in 1998 to 5 minutes in 2008. And Dr. Eric Topol was doing this research, and he said he went back and he tweeted and he said, what is the attention span today? And the question came back, what is it that you asked again? So, who knows? Mark Twain once remarked that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should use them in proportion. Simply stated, communication creates relationships if it is built on a bedrock of trust, of listening, and of respect. Long time ago, there was an editorial cartoon in the Bismarck Trib. It was the classic hold-up. But the individual holding the gun, pointing at the other person, was saying, this is not a hold-up. I need someone to talk to. People must believe, and this is from a wonderful little book entitled The Servant by James C. Hunter. He says, people must believe that you hear and understand their legitimate needs, not their wants necessarily, but their legitimate needs, and you have their interests at heart. There is no substitute for spending time with and listening to those you serve. Sister Mariah, you can go ahead a little bit. Sister Mariah, she's my wonderful friend, but it's weakening. There we go. Thank you. I said if she fell asleep, I'd know to quit. Margaret Wheatley's wonderful expert in organizational leadership, she says we can change the world if we just start listening to each other again. The second skill for the servant leader is of influence. And here I'm going to bring Hunter back because I like his definition of leadership. He talks about it as a skill of influencing people to work enthusiastically toward the goal that's been identified for the common good, with character that inspires confidence. So this is not the old command control model. This is empowering others. This is leading rather than pushing or manipulating people to do it just because I said so. What would that new model look like? I think more and more people in religion, business, and politics are talking about a model based on a vast net of relationships. Sister Ruth Fox, she's a Benedictine sister in the Richardson community. I like her. Here's what she says. She said she sees the new model as a web circle with the leader in the center reaching out to all the members. And David Gergen, who served 6 presidents in our country, said a president should see himself as the center of a web. Greenleaf uses the word persuasion, and he sees influence as the most exacting of the skills because you want those you serve to be acting out of their own motivation, their own intuitive sense of rightness about the vision that you as leader have articulated. And one more image, Lorraine Matusik was with Kellogg Foundation for a long time, and she says a leader must know and have the ability to communicate the vision with all of its possibilities. She says, I liken it to a ship that is thoroughly cleaned, oiled, and polished, but has no destination. The manager, who's very important, can take care of the maintenance, but you need a leader, a captain, to set the direction. So, you need a leader to listen respectfully to what's being said and not being said about the new direction. And by listening to your team and your collaborators, you will find the words to name the vision and to claim it. It begins with, here's where we are today. Here's our reality. To become better, to be more competitive in our market, we need to change. Here's what we will look like in 3 years, or 5 years, or 15 years. We all have experience of this very type of strategic movement forward planning in whatever organization we're apart from. But the servant leader invites those he or she serves to imagine a new future, and then to implement that plan will get them to achieve their roles. The last of the skills I would mention was that of building community. And there again, I think for the Christian, one of the most dramatic and challenging illustrations is Jesus washing the feet of the disciples. Here we have servant leadership in the form of a leader taking a basin of water, a towel at a banquet, kneeling down and beginning to wash the feet of his disciples. It's a startling act of humility. It's, in a sense, turning the world upside down. And the shock is not in the service, but the shock is in who does it. In that culture, it was either the slave of the household or the youngest child. But here's Jesus, the disciples' teacher and Lord, simply saying, I have set the example, and you should do for each other exactly what I have done for you. In a highly individualistic society where self often comes first, this icon of Jesus brings back the whole of his message. I came not to be served, but to serve. So the ultimate service of the servant leader, the implementation of the vision, is to build community, to honor and respect every member of the organization, to reach across boundaries and differences, sometimes in a fragmented culture, fragmented situation, fragmented world, and see in our differences the strengths that bring optimal effectiveness to our communities and our organizations. So we ask ourselves, are we willing to let go of our need for power and control in our family, in our place of work? Are we open to multiple perspectives, or is it always do as I say? Are we creating an environment where we can turn to one another in trust and where everyone has a voice? Can we actually use the word hospitality, the welcoming of the stranger into our being? It should be noted that there is a difference between choosing to serve, which is a natural gift, or choosing to be a servant, which is a choice, and it's a choice to lead. I first had this awareness from a little book entitled Benedict's Way. If we choose to serve, we're still in control. We decide whom we will serve and when, and we're still in charge. And our greatest fear is that someone will take charge over us because we can't let go of control. We can't risk losing power. On the other hand, if we choose to be a servant, if we hear the call to servant leadership, it's an entirely different paradigm. We give up control. The model is a network, not a pyramid. It's a choice that frees us from being manipulated because we voluntarily choose to be open and to listen to those we serve, like our customers, or in our families, our children, our colleagues. And it's a hard choice. But it frees us to be there for others and to recognize and celebrate employee accomplishments, to get out there and find out what our employees, our associates, our customers thinking and doing. At the end, it frees us for the greatest of acts, and that is to say, thank you. I needed you. We need each other. Thank you to all those who give our organizations or companies a future with an enduring mission. It's harder to lead than to serve. Let's do just a quick recap of the framework, foundation, earning the trust of those we serve, and then the two, talking about kind of a max view here, the two roles of the servant leader, giving direction, vision to the future of the product or the service, And then inspiring to service, to a service that builds community, that makes life better for others. And in that context, here again are just the three of the leadership skills that I mentioned today. Our credibility is reinforced by that premier skill to listen first. And the common vision is embraced by our colleagues, our associates, through our skill of influence. And finally, the essential service of the servant leader is to build community. The best test of servant leadership, and I end with Robert Greenleaf as I began with Greenleaf, simply to ask ourselves this: do those served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants? And what is the effect on the least privileged in society? You've been extremely kind, and it's just been a thrill to be with you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, wise woman. So we have some time to engage with Sister Thomas, who's going to be the first one to ask her a question. Perfect. I'll start with you because I want to.
Sure. Thank you so much for your presentation. I wonder what you would see as maybe the biggest or one of the significant challenges to servant leadership. I mean, it sounds so wonderful, something we all ought to do, but what are the challenges that we need to confront to make that happen?
Oh, thank you. I feel very good. I'm looking around at so many servant leaders here, so, you know, if I get stumped, I can just call on any of you, so thank you for that. But I think some of these comments I made here at the end, for some people, just through conversation, am I going to be walked upon? Am I making myself so vulnerable that I lose the influence that I hope I have with the members of my organization? I am the leader. And there's that fear of becoming, perhaps, as I mentioned earlier, as someone filling in a gap if they don't see that indeed I'm taking the kind of leadership that is more formal and that is probably more expected because we've lived with this model, the pyramid model, for centuries. And so for someone to start imaging that model of I listen and then I take counsel, and after I've taken counsel with the members of my organization, then the leader steps forward with the decision. Then the leader steps forward with the vision. But the servant leader takes counsel first and will listen. So I think there is that kind of natural fear. If I want to empower others, I need authority. Will I lose my authority if I take that role of servant leader?
Sister Thomas, you've been such a dear friend for so many years.
Thank you.
You growing up at Linton, North Dakota, which is not very far from Bismarck, where you've spent the bulk of your career. So you really did bloom where you were planted. So as a little girl, did you have dreams of becoming the kind of leader that you had the opportunity to be and that you have been?
Oh, thank you. You are a dear friend and very kind. You know, I didn't grow up with those kinds of aspirations, but I grew up in a wonderful family, and I had incredible teachers through grade school and high school. They were Benedictine sisters, and that, frankly, was the reason, ultimately, I think my call came to that kind of fruition and so on. So it was more in modeling. It was more in modeling. It was not the fact that I had a career plan. I remember well the day that our priors came and said, you know, I've gotten a call from the university, and would you be willing to put your name in the pool for possible candidates? And I'm thinking, well, whoa, you know, whoever got a, you know, what kind of an idea is that? I'm not discouraging career planning. I mean, if we have a center for career planning, for heaven's sakes, and maybe I should go there right now. But again, I think we're led in different times and in different ways through different, often I think it's the people in our lives, those who are our mentors and our coaches. And I think that is so important because everyone here can have an incredible role in terms of our next generation of leaders. And if we would be, and I think need to be willing, I remember a story, it happened near a real tragic time in a community that had a high school, and it was just a tragedy. And so they invited in a young psychologist to talk to the sophomores. She had these sophomore kids in front of her, and she was just dreading this experience. But she went because the teacher was a good friend. So she did her little thing, trying to encourage the students in the face of what had happened with losing a number of their fellow students and so on. And when she got all finished, she thought, oh no, sophomores, I'm going to get some kid's going to raise his hand, what in the heck do you know, et cetera, et cetera. And by golly, a young boy did raise his hand, and she called on him. And this kid looked at her and said, don't leave us alone. Don't leave us alone. I think, now I'm talking from my age, you are all too young, but I think it's very important that we do everything we can to coach and encourage and model, pray for our youth, and encourage them toward leadership. They absolutely have the capacity. They need models, and they need people to name their gifts, to specifically name their gifts. I think that is what we're called, someone in my role, that's what I'm called to. At this point in my life, is to do everything I can to mentor and encourage our next generation of servant leaders. I think if we think about the global situation, we think about how it is that we can heal the earth, I think it becomes increasingly important that we have that larger view of the whole of our planet, and find ways, and again, in which we can encourage solutions and help our next generation of leaders. That was part of my experience, and I think we need to hand it on.
Other questions?
I'll add this. Wheatley says, community is in real trouble when the elders cross the street to avoid meeting their youth.
Sister Thomas, you've had a tremendous leadership opportunity at the University of Mary. What do you see as the challenges for higher education today and as we go into the future?
I think, especially for us in private higher education, I think those challenges probably basically come to the same thing. We know for a healthy community, we make this commitment to our students. We're faith-based. We have incredible sacrifice that goes on the part of all of our faculty. But then at the same time, we're an extremely competitive arena. And it's an arena that's driven at this point by technology. And so our students come to us with a little bit different mindset. They talk about helicopter parents, but students, and especially parents, want instant results. And so when we begin talking about the humanities and the liberal arts, it doesn't quite seem practical enough to parents. And of course, we want our graduates to be getting jobs. Of course, we're committed to that. But at the same time, it's got to be more than a job. And we want to help our students to have their souls and their bodies, that we are preparing them as whole people, as whole persons, mind, body, and spirit. And there's a certain impatience about that. And part of it is technology. Now, technology is tremendous in terms of building community. It's tremendous, but there's got to be that thoughtfulness about how can we keep not only our presence, but how do we make it work bottom line? You need mission, but you also need margin. So how do we make all that work? It's very challenging in higher ed, and especially private higher ed. Why do I say that? When I started out as president, when we do our fundraising trips, Dr. Kraft and I were just talking about that. To be honest, we were the only ones on the street with the private schools because we didn't have the benefit of citizens' taxes and so on. But now we're all out there. We're all out there, and it's fine. You know, it's good, but we have to work harder. It's challenging. And then in addition, we have another kind of entity in the industry that we didn't have earlier, and that is the for-profits. That's new. Well, I shouldn't say new, but last decade or so. And so what does all that do? It speaks to our publics. And it says to our publics that what we see in one university, these astronomical tuition increases, that may be one school on the East Coast. That's not all of us. But we're all brushed in that stroke. And so it does become challenging, much more than you wanted to hear, Marilyn. I want to say I'm very proud of Marilyn. I babysat for Marilyn how many years? And let me tell you, she made me who I am today. Absolutely, that's the truth.
Marilyn just bombed me with one that I just read this week in a book written by 25 scientists. And one of them says that within the next 50 years, we won't have any need for schools.
Thank you. That makes my heart beat faster. Yeah. So everything through technology, network, the cloud, et cetera.
You mentioned that a time span is down.
Yes.
Who wants to sit in a classroom?
Exactly. Yeah, bricks and mortar, huh? It's similar in the healthcare industry. It's very, very interesting. Technology is it's an amazing tool that we have. It's when we move it beyond a tool to become a force in our lives, I think that we have to wake up and do some thinking about that. I'm absolutely convinced that when that young man said, "Don't leave us alone," that there will always be a need face to face. There will always be a need for personal relationships. After all, how do we describe the kingdom? You know, meeting God face to face. Well, we're not going to meet God face to face if we never sit down with each other face to face. And I can't imagine anything more exciting than face-to-face kind of opportunity for our younger generation with teacher, with mentor, with coach.
They did mention that unless it's the companionship.
Okay, good word. Companionship. Thank you. It's a good word.
To add to that, we struggle in our church with young people not wanting to sit in board meetings, at night, and they don't come to church once they're confirmed. What are your ideas for using technology with the younger people who may struggle with the rules of religion but are yet spiritual in their own being? And how do we help them cultivate that versus trying to force them to come into a church building every Sunday like their grandparents did?
Yes. If you have any ideas, please come to the stage. It is very real, isn't it? As I think about our students today, a lot of it depends on the families that they come from, doesn't it? I mean, some students come in and Sunday worship, even we have, as Concordia does, I've attended some of those services. We have worship services during the week as well. And if they see it embodied in their parents, they'll be there. But for any number of students, they will come unchurched, so to speak. And so I think you're touching on something to help meet our students where they are. And sometimes I notice in campus ministry that peer ministry can be very effective. Students meeting students. It doesn't, it can expand to more than that, but peer ministry, I think, is a wonderful way of beginning to engage students, inviting them to become. I think what we're talking about is helping our students become a part of a community where God is at the center, whatever their faith expression, but a community where they're supported by others who have a common vision. And so that kind of support, particularly as you think about them becoming parents, I think anything we can do to help them become a part of a community, a worshiping community, it would be one of the gifts that we as faith-based institutions could give to our next generation. Because it's a great question. Do I have the answer? No, as you can tell.
It seems like technology is outpacing our wisdom and our ability to control it and to use it. Can you comment on that a little bit more? You've been touching on that, if you could.
Thank you. I'm looking at some of our friends in the group who could answer this much better than I am, but I do think it's the first time ever in history where our youth have the upper hand. I mean, they have mastered technology. And for people like myself, I tell our students, I'm an immigrant. And the kid will always say, "Oh, sister, just call me anytime. I'll come and help you." and they are remarkable. But here, honestly, I would be very grateful for insights from any one of you on this whole question of technology and is it controlling our lives? And, we think about just one little piece, you think about drones and how it's taken up in the industry of business, so to speak. It's taken up in the industry of warfare, and very interesting questions. Would anybody be willing to share any insight?
It's frightening when you walk on a college campus and the students have one hand here and then it's handed to drink something and the other hand.
Isn't that what we miss the most? They used to say hi. Yeah. They are great at multitasking. But that's where I think this idea of mindfulness and this idea of being fully present, it's worth praying about and thinking about, because we need to be present to each other fully, wholly. The word holiness actually comes from wholeness. So how is it that we can be fully present to each other? And technology can be helpful in that. It can be helpful. But I think there are those times in our lives when I think mindfulness, to be mindful of what is happening at this moment, the sacredness of the moment, the present moment. Okay. Thank you.
I am filled with hope because I think that technology, like anything else, is a tool. And just to give a couple of examples where we can feel more connected through technology, I love Facebook because I get to see pictures of my great nieces and nephews and see stories and connect with different people in pretty meaningful ways, and sometimes not so meaningful ways. And so I'm filled with hope. And then this morning I also saw an article about how drones are being used to help limit the hunting of elephants. And I'm like, okay, so we need to remember that we have choices and we can choose to do things for good or not good. And those have been the same choices we've always had. So I choose to say, how are we more like how we always have been, and what the choices are, then how are we different?
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you.
Sister Thomas, I'd reflect a little bit on the vision component of your presentation in servant leadership, and would invite you to comment on the source of vision, whether vision comes out of the listening or whether there is some other dimension of appreciating the complexity of the universe that a leader brings into the equation. Could you talk a little bit about the birth of vision?
What a wonderful question and well stated. I think the vision, first of all, comes forward from mission, because our mission says, here we are, and this is what we do. This is what we commit ourselves to. So typically, the mission is kind of, if we think of a tree, it would be our rootedness, and we don't change our mission statement that often. I mean, we'll fine tune it when North Central comes, right, Dr. Kraft? Yeah, just fine tune. But
November 19.
oh, there we go. No, yeah. So the mission is foundation, and that vision flows from that mission, because the mission also it begins to spill our values. What is it that we value? So mission and values are the basic. The vision is what we imagine for our future. And so as we come to vision, I think that's where that idea of listening is important. I think that's the place where we're willing to listen to the voices of those we serve, our colleagues in our organization. If I think of the University of Mary, when we came forward with that idea of America's Leadership University, that was vision, and we spent a lot of time before we ever moved there in conversations, in smaller groups and so on, and listening to faculty, staff, and constituents, because we couldn't go forward with unless we had full support. And then ultimately you put words to it, and I think that's where the leader makes the decision and gives words to what they heard and didn't hear from the constituents. Excuse me. And then that vision will go out 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, and then it changes, because needs change. The needs that we are serving change. But I do think the role of the leader is to listen first, and then to bring it together, make the decision, give it a description, give it a way of talking about that vision, and then ultimately claiming that, bringing everybody to claim that vision, because that's then what affects the service that's provided. The implementation is implementation of the vision so that we can reach it in 5 years or 10 years or whatever the goal is. But I do think listening has a role. The responsibility of the leader is in building the community, bringing the people together, and then giving it a name, explaining it in a way that it's inspiring, that it's compelling, so that everybody will get behind a common mission, common values, and common vision.
My name is Bill Kraft, and I'm called to service and servanthood here at Concordia College. The mark of a good teacher in a good class is that everyone still has questions as time is running out. I'm the timekeeper here this afternoon. But I wanted to, I guess, use the privilege of my position to say a few things. And one of them is to say on behalf of all of Concordia College how glad we are to have the University of Mary here in your presence, Sister Thomas, and in yours, Sister Mariah. We're so pleased, and I hope that you will convey our greetings to our colleagues and friends at the University of Mary, and greet Monsignor Shea for us. And if I may be allowed an individual word, every once in a while, perhaps not often enough, but every once in a while, in the headlong rush that too often defines our lives, we meet somebody in whom the mind and the heart and spirit are one. And you know that when you know it, when you meet such a person. You know that when you meet such a person because their life speaks. Their life speaks.
And Sister Thomas is such a person. So we rejoice to have you here with us today. And let me say also that we rejoice to find once again that Concordia College and the University of Mary have common cause in what you were saying just a while ago, that we understand deeply our solemn obligation to prepare our students to flourish economically in the world in which they will compete. But we know that that is not all we do. We know that we are in the business of fashioning them as citizens who will be engaged in the vital work of democracy, and we know that we are in the work of fashioning their souls, to love their neighbors and to become servants. So I want to ask everybody to join me in thanking and recognizing Sister Thomas as our guest today.